I'm quite proud of the fact I was part of a group in the 70s and 80s who turned doing a restaurant for an architect into a building type. The thing isn't just the dining room and the aesthetic and the decoration, it's also whether you're too close to each other, whether the lighting is right, and I suppose it's the ability, like a conductor, to bring all those things together and make it work.
Kensington Place was the first of its kind. One of the sort of hallmarks of it was that huge plate glass window, window that goes down the street side. Was that dictated by the practicalities of the low budget?
No,
or by
there was a brick facade there. In fact, it had been very briefly a fish and chip place, trying to compete with Gilles, around the corner. It was a really dingy place, and we just blew it apart. And the facade was very much bringing the street and the city into the restaurant, making it as close as you could in Britain to having a cafe that flowed onto the pavement. That was the whole idea.
When I was talking to Ray Lee, the chef there, he saw no reason why good food should not be accessible to everybody. It didn't need to be hidden away behind this sort of enclave of elitism, essentially, is what it was. Now, so when you were called upon to design at Kensington Place, is that something that you actually bore in mind?
We never questioned that we were living in an egalitarian society, and we didn't discriminate. I mean, I still don't much. I mean, maybe I'm a fool for not discriminating between what some people refer to as the elite nowadays and the majority. And I think that, my father joined the Communist Party in the 30s, and the concept of the common good was one that was part of our DNA. We didn't question whether something should belong to an elite or a particular section of society. We just thought, open the doors. Although we'd done 4 or 5 other restaurants, this was the one that it turned out, with its fairly low budget, to be an ideal in the sense that, I'm saying this with hindsight, it had 2 of the best restaurateurs I've ever met, Nick and Simon. They were a repeat client in the sense that Nick had been hired as the manager of Zanzibar before it opened and was very much, in fact it was terrible. I was so mortified when he came and offered me Kensington Place, because the first time I met him, he put his head round the corner of my office when I was revising the plans for Zanzibar, 10 years before. And I just said, "You'll have to go away, I'm really busy." And he kept going back, and I said, "Oh." And but we became very good friends. And one of the nice things for us is that they extended it several times and asked us to go back and do the extensions each time. First of all, we extended the restaurant by about a third of the size of the dining room and made the kitchen bigger and better. And then we put a private dining room on the end, and then we put in a fish shop.
That's right, yeah.
The only thing we fought over with the 3 of them, Nick, Rowley and Simon, was the noise, because people often complained to me. My father just said, "I can't go to your restaurant, it's too noisy." And they wouldn't hear of us changing. We said, there's a very simple way to make it quieter. We could put a carpet.
Yeah.
I don't like carpets in restaurants much.
But noise is an essential part of the
experience. We knew it was going to be noisy. We warned them. We just said, this is going to be a very live and buzzy space. And we said, we think that's what you should do. If you're not going to do a posh restaurant with tablecloths and all that, but make a brasserie, it should have that quality. And the ideal for us was really La Coupole in Paris,
yes,
which is a wonderful restaurant.
There is actually, isn't it? Are you surprised really at the longevity of Kensington Place?
Well, it's gone now, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
Terence owns it now, and
In the spirit.
he's got a couple of guys. I mean, Terence was a good restaurateur. And, you know, one of his restaurants is still my favourite. One of my favourites, the one on Marylebone Road.
Yes.
It's called the Oratory.
The Oratory, that's right, just off, yes.
And Terence, you know, certainly knows about restaurants, but he didn't have that quality that Nick and Simon had of being there. And you know, what is very important is the client. You know, KP was a great restaurant because we had a fantastic client, and we never liked designing any project without a client. I mean, I once was asked by a guy who wanted me to design a house for him. He said, "We're going away for a year. When we come back, we hope the house will be finished." I said, "Well, it won't be, because I'm not going to do it unless you're here. Because I'm not going to design a house and have you arrive and say it's horrible. You know, you've got to get involved, and you know."
So this relationship between the client and
Absolutely
the artist is
essential.
part of it.
I mean, all great architecture has been made that way on the whole. I mean, even if it was a town hall or something,
Yes.
there was a good mayor or whoever who encouraged and got the right architect, and there was a dialogue and a good relationship.
So you can create the sort of ideal restaurant space and control everything in it, but it still requires that sort of human dimension to make it work properly.
Absolutely. I mean, what are architects about? They're supposed to be accommodating human beings in buildings and streets and gardens and hospitals and
Do you think
restaurants.
Do you think sometimes architects tend to forget that?
I think there's a lot of, you know, I mean, you know, the architecture has changed hugely in the last 10, 15, 20 years, and you know, you're expected now to, you know, be a brand and to create some sort of thing. And I mean, what client wants to have a brand? You know, that's what I keep wondering. Why do they go back to an architect? Why would a client want a building like the one the architect made for someone else before, i.e. that brand, you know?
Well, except that isn't this part of a tradition that's always been there? If you go back to the Renaissance time, you know, is that the patrons of the time, the princes, the bankers, whatever it happened to be, would hire Michelangelo or Leonardo to do something because he'd done it.
Because they were good architects, not because they created a particular style or made a particular kind of noise with their architecture. If you look at some of the greats like Le Corbusier or whoever, who did a few restaurants as well as other things, you'll see that they didn't hesitate in terms of the aesthetic. And the way I sum it up is that when you are asked to design something like even a glass, it has to have form.
Yes.
And you know, you could make it very big and very shallow, and then it would be difficult to use. You'd spill it all before you got it to your lips.
So there's a practical
So
side to it.
there are a lot of things that force design to go in a particular direction and become a particular thing. And in terms of restaurants, I mean, the wonderful thing is that they're public places and people see them. So there is a big demand and pressure. I mean, they were a nightmare, most of them. They were very unprofitable things to do because we had to design everything. I mean, we were very keen on that. The chairs and the tables. I mean, the chairs in a restaurant are incredibly important because that's mostly, you know, most restaurants are all chairs and tables. That's it.
That's it.
And there are a few walls around with some light fittings or something.
And how often is one's pleasure and meal affected by the comfort or discomfort of the chair you happen to be sitting on? Or worse than that, it's the height of tables or projections below tables, or if you can't stretch your legs out. It's small things like that which really do materially interfere with the pleasure.
Well, I suppose the thing that we did, which was important, was that we treated it seriously as a project, not as an interior decoration job. We did like to design the kitchens and work with the chef, whereas before, you know, in the old days, if I can be that vague, you got in a designer to do the interior decoration of the dining area, and a kitchen manufacturer, and they probably never even talked to each other, except for where the door between the dining room and the kitchen was. And I sat in kitchens and even went and worked in them in the late 70s and early 80s, trying to understand how it worked and why things, because you know, you could see the basics, and in those days the contractors who built kitchens were all these big old firms that did hospitals and all sorts of kitchens, and they were just interested in selling lots of big heavy duty equipment. And there was not the sort of subtlety that I discovered later by going to France and meeting people who made cooking equipment there, which was a very different scene. But one of the nice things was discovering how to describe it to the client and to the chef from the point of view of how I saw the kitchen working. And what I did was, I don't know if you know those diagrams you sometimes see on the BBC in a cricket match where
yes, of course.
And I said, we need a diagram like I want to know where that plate went around the kitchen, picking up the vegetables, whatever it was,
the sauce, the meat, the fish,
exactly. And how the thing worked. I said, because there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason other than you prepared, cooked, and then it was passed through a place where it went to the dining room, and that was very obvious. But after doing 10 restaurants, every chef had a very different idea about how he wanted his kitchen organised, and there were basic rules like you don't put a deep fryer next to a bain-marie because the fat popping over there would just sort of spit in your face and things.
Well, set the place on fire.
Yeah.
Well, there's also, because the other great change that has happened in the intervening years is the role of the chef in all of this, because Kensington Place was, in a sense, it was front of house led, although the chef had an important part to play in it. But subsequently, the rise of the ego maniac chef has become part. But presumably that has also been facilitated by the fact that the chefs, that kitchens have been designed around chefs rather than designed around some sort of pre-ordered plan.
Exactly. I mean, another nice early experience for me was that before I went to the AA to train as an architect, I had to get a job in an architect's office for a year, and I got a job in a very nice architect's office for £3 a week. And I couldn't afford to live on £3 a week, even though I was still living at home. I mean, even then it wasn't particularly a lot of money. So I got an evening job working in the French club in St James.
The Petit Français, remember it well.
My mother knew the owner, and I remember...
Owen Vaughan.
That's right. And she gave me a job, and I used to go there and wash up. There was a Scottish chef called Connie, who by the end of the first sitting was completely pissed. And sitting in a chair telling me how to cook omelettes and things. And so I didn't only wash up, and there were just the two of us in the kitchen. But I remember once there was some party, and I went upstairs and said hello, and a friend of my mum's was there. And he said, well, what are you going to do with yourself? And this fresh young Julyan was standing there. I said, I'm going to be an architect. He said, oh, I see, you're going to become a tradesman. And that's true of the chef, I think. I think the British thought of a chef as a tradesman, not as an artist, as a man who creates wonderful food.
A skilled practitioner, yes. But do you think there is also, in a sense, a parallel here or between food or cooking and architecture, is that you're taking ingredients and then transforming them? There's a process of transformation.
Yeah, I think there's a mysterious part, as I say, that the mysterious part of what a chef does is getting all those things that have come from the market in through a process of the mise en place and the preparation, and then through to the cooking process, and then delivered to the dining room in a particular way. And that, as I say, in my experience, all the kitchens I've ever visited of good chefs have been very different. There hasn't been, and certainly we haven't always done the same kitchen. Certainly with Rowley taught me an enormous amount about designing kitchens. There's no question.
Because it was a tiny space.
The original kitchen was impossible, actually. I don't know how he managed it. But that's the other thing, is you could make anything work. That was my other point, really, is that the size of the budget, the size of the space. Given the way we worked, which was to work at restaurants as an architect would. I think that I'm quite proud of the fact I was part of a group in the 70s and 80s who turned doing a restaurant for an architect into a building type, if I can put it that way,
Yes.
and took it seriously. And there are many more books than there were then now on designing restaurants and what's important. But as I say, the thing isn't just the dining room and the aesthetic and the decoration. It's also whether you're too close to each other, whether the lighting is right, how noisy it is, as we talked about, and all these sort of things are all combined. And I suppose it's the ability, like a conductor, to bring all those things together and make it work. And what is very important is the client. KP was a great restaurant because we had a fantastic client.
And as you look around the sort of contemporary restaurant scene, I mean, in a sense, one of the other effects that you had was to open the door to restaurant designers, which has subsequently become a sort of an industry in its own right. Not always, I would say, with happy results. But do you feel that? I mean, look at the contemporary restaurant scene. You see.
There are some pretty good restaurants, but I think, I think architecture and design in the UK has improved immeasurably in my lifetime. I mean, in the 60s, we were really quite an obscure minority in society talking about the things we were talking about. But now I think the conversation has opened up. I mean, television has played a part in that, in terms of, look at all the things about food and about restaurants and so on. And I think that's been good, and about architecture, of course. But television's done that for many things. It's not just, it just made things accessible.
Yes, that's
to
true.
more people.
Brought them into everybody's front room.
London is a great place to come and eat now. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I do.
I think there are loads of very good chefs and some pretty good restaurants.
Interestingly enough, I think one of the things that's happened, it took longer to happen in the kitchen, is that while your generation since freed up restaurants, opened the doors to restaurants, is that cooking still essentially remained Eurocentric. It was Rayleigh is a classically trained French chef, and his food, it has a profound influence on his food. It took probably another two decades for the kitchen itself to say, as your generation did in terms of design, is to say, we do not need to touch our forenox, the French, the Italians, the Germans, the Spanish, or whatever else. We will do our own food. And that is what we are now enjoying. I think we have a generation of really extraordinary talented young chefs who are out there changing the face of food in this country.
Loads, absolutely. So I say, my son is, I think he's a very good chef. He was until recently the head chef of Ketman's in
another grand survivor.
He's just about to do his own place.
You designing the restaurant?
He's asked me. I'm very hugely honoured. I think it's very nice because I didn't think his generation. I said you don't have to. Get a younger guy and so on. But no, he wants me to do it, which is very nice. In fact, we had dinner last night and talked about it.
How exciting!
It could be good. And I haven't done a restaurant since 2000 was the last one we did.
One of the things that has actually changed dramatically, I think, certainly in the 1970s, 1980s, is the amount of money needed to start up a restaurant in central London.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the budget was for KP?
$250,000, something like that.
And the budget took in when you designed the restaurant for your son?
I don't know, 4 times that, 5 times that.
That is an extraordinary reflection, isn't it, on the way in which...
But you can do restaurant, in the end, if the space is right, a coat of paint, obviously a bit of kitchen equipment and some tables and chairs is all you need.
Yes.
Obviously you need glasses and but it shouldn't have to go. we didn't think, oh God, they don't have a big enough budget. We just did the restaurant, and it was doable for what they said they wanted to spend.
Yes.
And actually, they didn't dictate a budget to us. They said, design us a restaurant, and we worked on it, and we didn't really have to struggle that hard to make it work.
In a way, it's the way in which restaurants have changed in terms of their social importance. In that, in 30, 40 years ago, they were, something like KP was radical. Now, and had a budget of £250,000. Now, restaurants are so important that they now command much bigger budgets in order to create them.
There were good restaurants in London as far as I'm concerned, in the 50s and 60s. I mean, like Bertarelli's. And what was the German place called on Charlotte Street? Schmidt's, crikey.
Yes, I do.
Which was quite, we used to eat there, and to Bertarelli's, and they were good, but they tended to not be English, that was the thing.
And they were, to be honest with you, they were okay. I mean, compared to the quality and range of food that we now find today.
Oh, they didn't compare, you're right, they didn't compare with the quality of Rowley and Alistair
and you played a critical part in that process.
Well, in a way, I mean, but it was an accident of time and place, and we were lucky to be there at a moment when society was opening up, and when the British did start to say, well, we're not going to have boiled cabbage to death, boiled to death cabbage, and beef that was like leather and so on, And I guess we talked about dining out and going to restaurants and cafes and so on as something that should be there, like the bus stop or the park or the cinema. It's a part of the city. I mean, I've often sold the planners, when I was trying to get planning permission for a restaurant, the idea that it was a public service, and they'd look at me and sort of say, well, doesn't it have an owner who's going to make profits? And I said, well, yeah, I suppose so, but
But the other things come first. So how did the transition from fiery radical to grand old man?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm a grand old man. Right? I'm not particularly popular in the establishment in architecture at the moment, for many reasons.
Yes, you've been rather forthright in your criticisms of some of these.
One other thing my parents taught me was to try and be honest about things, and I'm probably a bit over keen on being honest, but I'm quite pleased to hear that I'm not part of the establishment, because maybe my son wouldn't be asking me to design his restaurant, because it's not going to be for me, it's going to be for kids of his age, and younger.
And that's a really exciting challenge.
Yeah.
Julyan Wickham, thank you very much indeed for talking to me. I look forward very much indeed to eating in this place.